Welcome back to this episode of the Common Cultures podcast. I am here with today's guest, Elysia Butler, who is the founder of the Hope Heroes Foundation. Give us like a 3-sentence who you are, what's your background, and what you're up to.
Well, like you said, Elysia Butler, and I have been on a journey of mental health things since a kid. I've loved psychology and how people's minds work and why people do certain things.
Yeah.
And it's led me to explore a lot more of that.
Awesome.
And I'm married. I've been married for, I was 18 when we got engaged.
Dang.
19 married, and we're going on, this year will be 22 years.
Congratulations, because that's
been married.
That's awesome.
And I still like and love him, which is, one of those things that we joke about because it's like people say, oh, well, I love them. But it's like, do you like them too?
Yeah.
Like there's got to be, that.
Yeah.
And so married to my best friend, and we have 3 amazing kids.
Awesome. How old are they?
So our oldest is 19.
Okay.
And he's part of the story with that, and maybe we'll dive into that a little bit later, but 19-year-old, and then I have a 16-year-old boy, so the 2 oldest are boys, and then we have a 13-year-old girl.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. And I start off every episode with the same 3 questions just to get like a baseline of where your thought process is on life. How would you personally define sustainability?
Sustainability.
Yes.
So I think that is creating patterns, habits, things that you're going to be able to do day in and day out that benefit your life.
Totally.
Like I think a lot of people end up going, oh, I want, that quick fix.
Yeah.
Well, quick fixes are not sustainable. That's why there's always the yo-yos of different things.
Totally.
So finding what works for you and your life is what's sustainable, and it's different for everyone.
And how would you define community?
Community is coming together with a purpose.
Awesome. Love that.
I think keep it that simple.
There you go. I love a good simple answer. And in an ideal world, what would a sustainable community look like for you?
I think that would be, like I said, so if it's people coming together with a common purpose. Yeah. And so mine is to empower people to be their best selves. Yeah. Right? And so gathering people together who are like-minded or want a lot of the same outcomes and working together in a solutions-based orientation rather than focusing on the problem and the negatives and the crisis and the, oh my gosh, I can't do anything, because the reality is that one person can change the world. Totally. And the ripple starts with just opening up your voice and speaking about it.
Awesome. I love it. And so going way back, where are you originally from?
I grew up in Kaysville, Utah.
Okay, so you are a lifelong Utahn.
Yes.
One of my favorite questions, this is a slight sidebar. In your lifetime, what is the biggest change outside of population as a metric itself that has impacted your life in Utah?
I think I'm going to tie it to sports. Okay. So I was an athlete. I'm the youngest of 5. I have 4 older brothers. Okay. So only girl, 4 older brothers.
Seems like a genetic trait in your family to have a bunch of boys and then a girl.
So, and the crazy thing is that my mom is actually the youngest and only girl in her family as well. So we have wild. 3 generations of that. Like it's crazy, right? But I think the biggest impact is my family, and then I've always had that drive, like my brothers, to keep up with things. It was like life was already going, and it helped me to be determined and have goals and to be able to really push myself to excel.
Awesome. And what was life like growing up in Kaysville? How would you describe your childhood?
well, like I said, I'm the caboose.
Yeah.
And my closest brother is about 4.5 years older than me.
I know that feeling.
So it's like, by the time I came around,
yeah.
they were kind of like, done.
Yeah.
You know, like I didn't really get in trouble with things. If I did get grounded, I'd go into my room and read,
yeah.
which I know sounds like crazy, but I ended up being an English teacher with that. And then I had a lot of fun. Like I did a lot of things that my parents are like, wait, you did that? And I'm like, yeah. Like, but today kids can't do that without, you know, a camera or something, or someone calling the, you know, the police or whatever on them, when it's just kids having fun.
That's fair.
It's kids having fun.
It's kind of wild how different just the amount of phone and like cell phone has changed childhood. Because like I was born in the late 80s, and in the 90s, like I would go out with my friends in the neighborhood, but like all we were doing was we were riding around bikes and stuff like that. Whereas like now it's like everyone's sitting there on their phones, or even if they're out doing things, they're all still on their phones. Fascinating. Were you born and raised LDS or non-LDS?
LDS.
Okay. Are you still a member of the church?
My records have not been removed.
Okay.
How's that?
No, that's fine. No. It's a curiosity question, because I've had guests that are lifelong Utahns that are both LDS and non-LDS, and then also still active and non-active. And I just like to have an understanding of like where
it plays into the dynamics of things. So I would say, like grew up that way. Yes, we were married in the temple, very dedicated for years. And then it was honestly from the last 15 years. So once I was 25, I actually was like, wait, all my friends are getting divorced or having affairs or this or that. And all these things that I was like, something's not adding up. It's not making sense. And I really, you know, like, and people are going to have different takes on this.
Totally.
But for me, that's when I actually started thinking for myself instead of just, and questioning and going, well, why? How does this make sense? And the amazing thing is that honestly, now in my life, I feel more connected to God and Christ because of the experiences that I've been through. I would not say I am religious. I would say I am spiritual. And if I had to classify it, yes, I'm a Christian. And I also believe in the universe and the quantum physics of everything. And feeling like what's true for me, because I don't think I actually had a conversation, have multiple conversations about this, but it's like, I don't think there can be one truth for every single person, because we can't even agree on, you know, what to watch for TV, where to go for dinner. Like, I think there can be the right truth for you and the right truth for me.
It's funny you say that, because that's literally like the core of this podcast. So like, what led me to starting the podcast was I've traveled all over the world. I've been to more than 25 countries, 5 continents, been through a lot of culture. And what I've noticed is it doesn't matter where I am, who I'm talking to, what language it is, or what the economical state is of a country. Everybody wants their basic needs met. They want their kids to have a better education than they had, and they want joy in life. Outside of those 3 things, it looks totally different for everybody.
And I think that's incredible, because joy, like a lot of people don't even experience that in life, because they're thinking, I've got to do X, Y, and Z. And when I get X, Y, and Z, then I can experience joy. And I feel that it's experienced in the journey of it, like finding those happy things in the midst of struggles, finding the positive to look at. And you talked about basically Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We've got to get our basic needs met, and then the actualization of things. And it's like, I think too many people are too busy doing the doing instead of enjoying and
100%.
being. Right?
100%.
Yeah.
Interesting. And so after high school, where did you go? What did life look like? Obviously, you got married young, so what was post-high school
So I actually had a full athletic scholarship for soccer, and awesome. I went and played down at SUU in Cedar. I was actually, this is an interesting fact, I was the very first signee ever for their women's program.
That's awesome.
So
Congratulations.
I know, right? Back in 2001,
That's
which
awesome.
is crazy. And so I played soccer down there.
Cool.
I did that for 3 years.
Yep.
I ended up having a traumatic brain injury. Like I got knocked out when we were playing up at Weber State. I passed out. Then I ended up having surgery, and I just didn't end up. Well, okay, I should clarify that. I did not have brain surgery or anything. The next game, I blew my knee out.
Okay.
And then...
Very big difference.
Yes, I was like, hold on, let me back up there.
But also, as an athlete, going from a TBI to a potentially career-ending injury has a massive impact on your mental state.
So it absolutely does. And one of the reasons that I ended up leaving soccer is because my whole identity was attached to the athlete, not me as an individual.
Yes.
Because I got lots of recognition and, you know, my parents are so proud of it. And what I realize now as a parent who has had a collegiate athlete, like I make sure I tell that kid, I'm like, you are the magic.
Yep.
It is not like your ability is an extension of the magic that you create inside, like that internal. And I always tell him, like, I don't care if you continue to play football or not, your worth is your worth, and it will not change by what you do. And I know my parents felt that way about me, but back in growing up,
it wasn't communicated the same way.
Yes. And so that was one of those reasons why I ended up, you know, quitting soccer. And because when you are young and married young in Utah and following the expectations, it's like, well, now you're married, it's time to start a family.
Yeah.
And that's what we did.
Yeah.
That's what we did.
Yeah. That makes sense. What was the transition like for you going from Elysia the athlete to Elysia the more holistic human being?
I think that has taken a lot of years.
That's fair.
To do, because it was going to the athlete, then to mom. So, so it really...
So you didn't even really get to be yourself outside of athletics because you jumped straight into parenting.
Yes.
Ooh, okay. That's, I see where you're going.
Because I ended up, you know, doing the athletics from 18, well, I was technically 17, 18, 19, 20. Yeah. Right? And then have a baby at 21.
Yeah, you really didn't have any...
There wasn't any of that. And then there were complications with different things with him. Yeah. And, you know, miscarriage, all of those things tied into it. And then still, I look at like my son's 20. I was like, oh my gosh, I was pregnant with you, like at this age. And I'm like, I had no idea. We had no idea what we were doing, but we were doing it because that's what we thought was expected of us, right? Instead of doing
what was best for you guys.
Yes, but we didn't know because, like I said, I didn't really start thinking about those things until after I already had 2 kids, you know, 25, going to start teaching. So I really think that is where I started thinking for myself and going, well, who am I? Yeah. When I was 25, got into teaching. Yeah. And starting to see different perspectives of like, wait, like these guys are happy, like, and they're not doing
these things that I did.
Yes. Yeah. Because I stayed home, you know, went to school, stayed home with, you know, with the kids.
What was it like going through school while being a parent?
You know, I've done that twice now because I did that. So once Gage was born, he was like 6 months old, and I'm like, I need to go back to school. Like I'm going to finish my education. So I did that, raising a baby, and then also being pregnant, and then having another one. So I finished my college when my second was 1. Okay. Okay. And so like, sometimes I'm like, why? I chose the hard path. Like what I tell girls now, I'm like, and I'm all finish your career, or not your career, your education
yeah.
so you have something, because that wasn't taught to us. I'm grateful I did that, but a lot of my best friends who I went to high school with, guess what? They didn't finish their degrees.
Yeah.
And then when you're in your 30s or 40s and you're going through a
way
divorce,
harder.
And you have no education to be able to...
Or some skill set to lean back on,
to be able to provide for the family once that...
Split.
Yes. And so that, I think, is a disservice that happens here in Utah, is not saying, hey, girls, women, you need to have something that is sustainable, that you can support yourself on your own.
That makes sense.
Right?
Yeah. Do you feel like it is starting to change? Okay.
I do. There's a lot more women empowerment stuff.
Yeah.
And women in business. Like, I was at UVU doing a collegiate case study with women, college girls throughout the nation, and empowering them to like chase their own careers and do some of that. And so
that's awesome.
There's a shift for sure.
But it's just taking time. That checks out. That's
20
the way
years,
it goes. Yeah.
Right? 20 years.
It's wild how different it is in general now, especially in education and higher education, when it comes to support for demographics that didn't necessarily have as much support, even though there was expectation 20 years ago, which is wild to say. Like, I was talking to somebody the other day about how people who were diagnosed as ADHD as adults didn't get that support as a kid because, you're just disruptive. And like in the 90s and early 2000s, you had to be like severely on the autism spectrum or some sort of obvious developmental disability to get help. Whereas now it's like, I struggle with this. Okay, let's get you some help. And I feel like that's a massive change for the better for kids today.
So I'm going to do both sides of that.
Yeah.
Okay, because I was in the education space, and I think a lot of parents are looking to say, okay, well, my kid needs help with this. And sometimes it is used as a crutch.
Totally.
Okay.
That's fair.
And so, like, I see both sides of that. Like, all of my kids have ADHD. All right. Like, and they, my husband does too. It's like passed on. I probably do as well, but I can like hone it in a little bit more.
That's fair.
And kids, like, I think a lot more are being diagnosed with ADHD when it's just like, wait, we're learning differently. It's not necessarily ADHD with the attention span of things. I think it's the way culture and society has shifted into quick
I mean, we live in an instant culture. Nothing I've realized that like there's the old like you need to have something in front of somebody 7 times before they start to remember it, and I feel like it's now like 20 plus because people are, it's like such a scroll culture, like okay, what's the next thing, okay, what's the next thing, okay, what's the next thing,
and if it doesn't capture it with that initial hook, then it's
game over.
I do the same thing, you know. So,
what was it like being an educator? Because you were an educator from the mid 2000s, from what I'm piecing together, to 5 years ago, I think it was.
Actually, only 2 years ago.
Oh, okay.
I just
So you were in the classroom for the evolution of the cell phone to smartphone. What was that like from an educator's perspective?
Well, I want to point out that I'm not your typical educator.
You are. Nothing is typical about you.
Well, that's funny because my dad would always say, he's like, once I think like you're doing something, all of a sudden you take like a sharp pivot, like, and you do something totally unexpected that I'm like, well, that's just what she's going to do.
That's what I do.
And so I probably have a different take on that than most educators because...
But I still want your take on this.
Okay. So in the beginning, most of the kids did not have the cell phones, and they weren't getting them out. So I started in 2008 and I taught junior high. So mainly 9th graders. So I had 7th grader, 7th, 8th, 9th graders, but it's mainly 9th graders that I taught.
Yeah.
And so they didn't really have the phones.
That's fair.
And it, and if they did, it was like, just put it away.
Yeah.
Right? But then jump forward to 2022.
Yeah.
every kid has it.
Yes.
And I know there's like lots of things in districts like, hey, we're going to have a no cell phone policy and different things. I see both sides of this.
Yes.
Because those kids who are being very distracted with it and pulling it out, because when you know, there's studies, I couldn't tell you like the numbers or anything with this, but when you have that ding, it distracts you, and then I think it's somewhere between 30 to 90 minutes for you to actually get back focused on what you were doing. So it distracts all the time.
Yeah. Well, and you multiply that by 20 to 30 kids in a classroom.
Yes.
And I saw a thing on Facebook recently where like a teacher had the students do check marks every time a device went off, and they had to like say what platform it went, and they had like 150 check marks at the end of one class period, which... That is literally like a distraction for an average 60-minute class. That's every 30 seconds.
Yeah.
You are having a distraction in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's those things where it's like the kids are disengaged from what's going on, right? But then that also goes back to, well, what's the content? How are you doing your classroom management and different things, getting the kids engaged in the content you're learning?
That makes sense.
And so there's variations with that. And I also see like a lot of kids would use the tools, like they'd ask a question. I said, well, why don't you Google that?
Yeah.
Why don't you look that up and then you tell us, so that they're going to be able to learn it? Because instead of fighting against the technology, we learn it as a tool to enhance their educational experience.
That's fair.
And so, in a lot of the school platforms, they submit their assignments online.
Yeah.
So some of those kids, I literally had kids who would type their papers.
Yeah.
They prefer to type and text versus than the normal laptops that we had available.
Yeah.
There's also, you know, if we go back to the distractions and ADHD, there's lots of research to back up that when a child is able to put the music in,
they just keeps them, hone it in.
Yeah, like there's distractions going on here, but they're not disrupting the entire class.
That checks out.
And they get their work done.
That makes sense.
And so there's so many sides of that.
There's pros and cons.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fair. And there's no such thing as a perfect solution.
No.
I feel like everything in life is a shade of gray. Mm-hmm. And people try to look at things as black and white.
Yeah.
And
Well, I always say, I'm like, okay, give me, you know, like 50 yards on either side of what like the rule is or whatever. And that's really, you got to be able to like blend back and forth.
That makes sense.
Between those things.
That makes a ton of sense. And also during that time frame, how, like, we talk a lot about mental health these days, and that's a big chunk of what you do now. How would you see the evolution of the kids' mental health as devices become more popular, reliance on social media becomes more popular? How would you say, in your opinion, that evolved over time?
I think it's the addictive nature of it. It was a new thing. Parents were involved with it, right?
Yeah.
And so the kids are seeing the parents on it.
Yep.
And then there haven't really been set up boundaries proactively on the devices with it.
There's no such thing as boundaries.
Right? And so it's like, okay, well, because the parents don't know all of the things that the kids are getting into. So there's a lot of that. And I think it's actually one of the studies says 71% increase in mental health struggles.
Wow.
Okay. And here's the crazy stat that is the same, is that there's been a 71 increase in the technology usage on social platforms for the kids as well.
That doesn't surprise
So
me.
it's like they're going up together, and it's so we're not going to be getting rid of these, but how do we educate? How do we start bringing in some of those boundaries, some of those expectations? And really the boundaries, like when you think of a boundary, you're like, okay, that puts it in the black or white thing.
Yeah.
Well, I like boundaries as bridges. All right.
Okay.
So boundaries are bridges, either, you know, keeping you in alignment with what you're wanting and then to what's actually happening.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. And so I think a lot of it is going to be learning how to teach your kids to use it in a proactive way. In my book, I have, create a purpose and an intention for why you are going on social media. If you're going to just scroll and numb, then maybe you should go on a walk instead. Maybe you should do some different things, right?
Yeah. That makes sense.
So there's got to be a purpose for why you're on a certain platform.
Yeah, that checks out. Mm-hmm. And do you feel like with that rise and typical lack of intent, that has also led to a lot of schoolyard things happening, so like bullying and like that stuff? Do you feel like that has played a role in a lot of the mental health issues?
Yes, because you can post anything online and not have a face with it.
Yeah.
You can say anything about someone and there's not an immediate consequence for you, the person doing it, nor do you know the impact or the ripple that is happening in someone else's life. Like, there's so many times where the bullying, I've asked kids about this, because the work that I do, I make sure I get, if we're going to prevent teen suicide, we've got to talk to the teens and say, what are you seeing? What are you noticing? So that we can proactively prepare and empower kids, right? And I asked if there's, like physical bullying and a lot of that. And they're like, no, it's mainly
online.
It's online. But if you look at, you've been on the platforms, look at these adults doing the same thing.
It knows no age. And I honestly think adults feel like they can get away with it more, because especially like on Facebook, I'm connected to people all around the globe. Yeah. And most of the people I talk to are not in a geographic location where I am. Mm-hmm. And so people feel like there's less repercussion because they never have to see the person face to face.
Yes.
And there is the age old, like, eventually if you're a bully, you might end up getting punched in the face. Mm-hmm. That doesn't happen if they are not in the same space.
Mm-hmm. Well, because you don't see, like, the connection, right? And the actual face-to-face stuff, like realizing, oh my gosh, that's an actual person that I'm impacting in a negative way. Like, you can have your ripple be negative or positive, and a lot of people aren't realizing the negative.
I also feel like if it's somebody that we don't agree with ideologically, we tend to dehumanize the person. And then because we have dehumanized the person, we are more willing to say things we wouldn't say to an actual person or somebody that we see value in. And I feel like that's another thing. And I'm guilty of it myself. I will be like fully transparent. And but I feel like we are much more willing to say things that we would never say to somebody that we see as an actual person.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree with you. Like, it really is that dehumanization, that it's just a number. It's not a real person. And that's where, we say that we're more connected socially, right? Or, electronically, but we've lost human connection and interaction and community, like you talked about, like creating community.
Yeah. It actually requires relationship to have community. Mm-hmm. And relationship looks different in different environments, but it requires more than surface.
Yeah. It requires you to actually step into what someone else might be feeling or doing.
Empathy.
Yes, and I talked about this like with tone and text messages and did that, like, and one of the things that I teach kids is, and I say this, and it's from my dad, but you put the emphasis on the wrong syllable.
I love that
phrase.
Yes.
Because it's like you can change the meaning of any sentence based on the emphasis and the tone.
Totally.
And so, like, what I want people to realize is read it, right? In, like, most people read it in the negative. So, okay, read it in the negative,
100%.
and then flip it and read it in the positive. And then chances are somewhere in the middle is the intent behind what that person was meaning.
Good way to approach it.
Yeah.
So what led you to wanting to start Hope Hero Foundation?
There are basically 3 catalysts for that. Okay. And so how I had mentioned, my son.
Are these life events?
These are life events.
Cool.
these are life events, real life, like, has led me to this. And the first one is that I know what it's like to have a child who doesn't want to live. Mm-hmm. And that boy was 7 years old.
Oh, okay.
He was 7 at that time.
That's young.
It is young. And like I said, we had started young. There were complications with birth. And I think there's different things that led to behaviors for this child. Yeah. And my degree's in psychology. I actually did some of my research papers on my own child, knowing, okay, like these are not necessarily in line with what's considered normal, even though normal's like a broad thing, right? Yeah. And my mom didn't actually tell me until my second was born that, hey, this is kind of how babies are supposed to act and behave. And I was like, but I didn't know as a young mom, right? Like just doing my best with things. Yeah. But
there's no playbook for being a parent.
No. And I always like say, I apologize. Like a lot of parents do not apologize to their kids because as parents we're taught, oh, well, we're supposed to know everything. It's like, I haven't lived today with you yet. Like, I don't even know what's coming. Like, how could I be able to know what to do in every single moment with
and
things?
Also, especially like sub 5, they're learning how to communicate their needs, and everyone communicates needs differently. Yeah. When they don't have actual words, they're trying to figure out how to tell you what they need, but they can't.
Mm-hmm. Well, in tantrums, right? It's like they are feeling these emotions and not knowing how to express them, and then so we have there's so many things that happen with that and communicating with your kids, and I've learned a lot through a lot of this, but. So my first experience was when my 7-year-old grabbed a knife.
Got it.
He had run away from home multiple times, like, I mean, for 30 minutes or something, packed a backpack, whatever, was back because it's raining and different things. But I came home from the classroom the first time to save my own son's life. And I want parents everywhere to get the book. And it's a book that's been around forever, but it's The 5 Love Languages of Children. Okay. It's been around forever. Read it, adapt it, because having something and reading it but not implementing it, you might as well not know it.
Totally.
So that is something. So like I said, my oldest is now 19. He just went and played college football. Yeah. So going from a little boy who didn't want to live to a man living his dream and chasing and pursuing that. Yeah.
Vastly different.
Yes. And it's the day in and day out work, how you talked about sustainability. Yeah. Okay. It took 2 years before we thought, is this working? Does he feel loved? Does he feel seen? Does he feel valued with it? And the answer, obviously is yes. That little boy, he still will get on, the couch and be like, Mom, will you tickle my back? Yeah. He still wants that. That relationship was built when that little boy just needed love. He needed to know Mom loved him, but we weren't showing it in the way he understood it.
Yeah, and he needed something different than what was available at the time. Yeah,
and we did get him, the psychological help that he needed as well. So it wasn't just like one thing; it was a lot of little things that we did to turn his life around, and consistently did that throughout, his entire childhood.
Do you feel like that changed your outlook on life overall?
Absolutely. It changed the way we parented our other two. Completely changed. Like my daughter grew up with a different mom, knowing all of these things from birth on.
That's
it changed everything for how we parented. It saved our marriage.
That's
when
huge.
You have kids struggling with mental health stuff, there's struggle between
the caretakers.
Yes.
Yeah. So what was the second?
The second was in 2016 when my sister-in-law overdosed. Okay. And so she lost her battle to her mental health struggles. She was a second mom to my kids. We joked that we had joint custody. Yeah. Did family trips together. Yeah. All of that. So when you lose someone that is a sister to you, it changes you. You will never be the same. Yeah. And a lot of people say, well, resiliency is bouncing back. No, you will never be the same. Resiliency is bouncing forward and moving through whatever event happened or conversation. It doesn't even need to be as dramatic as what happened to me.
But also the grief that comes from it processes differently to different people depending on the relationship.
Oh, it absolutely does. And so that shifted again. That was a pivotal moment. So back in the classroom, I made sure that I was going to let those kids know that they mattered, that they were important, they were valued no matter what. So I gave high fives to kids every single day at my door and greeted them with a positive interaction before they ever stepped foot into my classroom for my last 6 years. Yeah. During COVID, it was air high fives.
Oh, totally.
But they still loved it. And that was one of the things that these kids would talk about because, and on end of year surveys and different things that I did, there were many times where those kids were like, you were the only one who saw me that day. You were the only one who was positive. These kids are walking around these schools not ever being seen by another teacher, another student. And it's sad. It's sad.
It's also isolating.
Yeah.
Because you're around all these people, but also feeling like you're not actually with all of the people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I stepped into doing a lot of work in suicide prevention in the schools and doing programs. I did that for 3 years at one of the schools I was at, and then I actually taught the class at my last school for 3 years. And so we were really able to implement a lot of the mental health strategies, noticing if kids were struggling, how to be able to support someone, refer them to help with it. And so I became nationally certified in suicide prevention. And I have done that since 2016.
Wild.
Yeah. So going on 8 years now?
Is it weird to think that it's been that long?
Yes.
Do you look back and notice moments where you're like struggling of like, is this all worth it? And then have something happen where it's just like, okay, this is reassuring that I'm going in the right path.
Mm-hmm. I think it happens all the time.
Okay.
Honestly, because, like a few weeks ago, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is an uphill climb to get people to look at stuff in a proactive approach rather than reactive. So even though like I did a lot of that in the schools, that approach absolutely saves lives. And it was a monumental movement to go, okay, here's what kids are struggling with. Here's what adults are struggling with. But what's happening now is that people are wearing masks. So these signs, people are covering those up time and time again. It's like, oh, I'm good, I'm fine. Fine is actually rock bottom. So if someone says, I'm fine, you better ask some more questions.
Especially when you get like a short tone of voice.
Yes. And so there's different things that we used to teach about, or, I've taught all of these things. I have videos out there going through all of these, and those are still valid. They're absolutely valid. And we need to look before we get to teens who are in crisis. And so it's empowering them early on with that.
So what does early empowerment look like?
Early empowerment looks like a trifecta. Okay, with the kids, the parents, and the schools and communities. So getting involved so that, like we talked about, with a common purpose. How do we, all tides rise together, right? Or did I say that wrong?
I think so, but I don't know the actual, I know where you're trying to go. It's basically like everyone can come up together if it's working together, but if one piece comes out, then like it falls apart.
Yes. We're gonna figure that out after this.
As soon as we stop recording, it's gonna be like, oh yeah, there it is.
It's okay though, because this is like real life. Like we're just flying and doing this. But it takes empowering the kids, looking instead of staying in the crisis and the struggle of it. We look for solutions based stuff. And a lot of the positive psychology is my background with things. It doesn't mean everything's like, woo, rainbows and, sunshine. It's
never going to be.
It is looking at, okay, it's building that resilience from an early stage, because when you are taught those things over and over again of how to be empowered to overcome things and to be your own hero, like there's a whole pattern, and that's like what I've created with it based off of Joseph Campbell's work.
Who is Joseph Campbell, for those who don't know?
Okay, so Joseph Campbell, he's the author of A Hero with 1,000 Faces.
Okay.
And so what he did, he was a researcher, scientist, and so he compiled this book.
Yeah.
And you can get that, anywhere, honestly. But what he looked at is the myths from all these cultures, across every culture.
Okay.
And there is a pattern for those who rise to the top.
Okay.
There is a pattern for those who are successful.
Yep.
You can do it with any myth, whether it is real or not, like with the Greeks, the Romans, Egyptian mythology, all of that. And even if we tie it back to Christianity, I can walk you through the whole hero's journey of Christ's life.
Yeah.
And to do that and to know that you are going to go, let's simplify it real quick. Okay, you're going to be called on an adventure.
Yep.
You're not going to want to go. You're going to be like, I don't think I signed up for this. But you're going to go anyway.
Yeah.
And along the way, you're going to find mentors and people who will help you and support you. You're also going to find people who are against you.
Yeah.
There's going to come a point where you're like in a dark cave.
Yep.
And you're like, I'm not for this. Like, I'm just going to stay here and not get out of this. So I think a lot of people end up, when they don't rise out of that cave ends up becoming their new normal.
Yeah.
That depression, that anxiety, that fear-based stuff. But those who have the resilience to move through something, they come out with a new mindset, knowledge, skills, empowerment. They embody that new person, that new version of who they are.
Yeah.
And then now it's their turn to teach others the way to work through some of those.
Yeah.
This cycle is not ever going to go away. It's from the beginning of time, and all of us are on that every single day.
Yeah.
And it's that you have to choose to get out of that darkness, because the darkness will let you stay there as long as
you're willing to sit there.
Yes.
And I also feel like along that line is like, this isn't like a one-time thing. Mm-mm. Like, this can happen over and over and over, and truly going through what you say is like, how do I work through X? Mm-hmm. How do I work through this garbage I am dealing with is huge.
Yeah. It's teaching those tools of mindset and resiliency and growth.
Yeah.
And you can have multiple of these heroes' journeys happening in different areas of your life. So with the relationship with your kids, with school, with church, with work.
Yeah.
All of them, and you might be at different points in every single one of those simultaneously.
Yeah. That's true.
But a lot of people don't understand, we say, a journey. But people don't actually understand all of these details into what a hero's journey looks like. And so I've simplified a lot of that for teens, and actually for, ages 5 and up.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
You're good.
What does the next phase of Hope Hero Foundation look like for you?
The next phase is impact.
Okay.
The next phase is impact, and getting these pilots of programs and different things that I've created with the curriculum.
Yeah.
Getting it out there in already existing community programs that are out there. I've created it. I've been the teacher, and now what I want to do is teach other facilitators and teachers to be able to do this and duplicate it.
What types of communities are you ideally trying to get into?
For sure, the schools. We're working on doing some of that, working with Utah State and creating some pilot programs K through 12th grade to get this backed up by the research and the testing, that to hit the check marks, right, of the black and white thing. Like, there's certain roles and things that I've got to follow for the evidence-based structure of this, even though I did this for 6 years in my classroom. We've got to have additional support to back up that it's duplicatable. So getting those out there, there's lots of community programs and people who want to help and empower kids to do that. And so what I would like to do is get that curriculum, get the books, the workbooks into the hands of these people who are saying, hey, I want to help these kids, but I don't know what to do. Well, we have a proactive approach to be able to do this for the kids.
Cool. Sorry.
You're good.
What does the next year and the next phase of life look like for your family?
Well, that's crazy to think about because
you got one in college.
One in college.
One in high school.
Yep, and he'll be a senior this next year.
And then your daughter is middle school going into high school next year?
So no, she'll be in 8th grade next year. So she's still, she's still there. It looks like, so I want to be able to go and speak more about this and to educate others to get it out in bigger scales.
Do you see yourself bringing your son out with you to speaking engagements to be part of the story?
Yes. He's actually going into sports psychology.
Oh, interesting.
Right?
Interesting.
And so that the mindset stuff that we've been doing with him has impacted him in a way where he sees a lot of the connections with being able to work through these things and do that. So
and being actively in athletics, both high school and college, you see that on a daily basis. Both sides of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the impact with that, and our middle's going into diesel mechanics, and then my daughter and her friends, like, it's actually really cool because the teens come to our house.
Okay.
Like, and they want to be there because, and a lot of them, even just last week, one of her cute friends is like, I love being around your mom because she actually talks to us and gives us, like, we have real conversations about things of how I can, like, work through someone saying something mean to me and this. And
it's conversations with, not talking at.
Yes. So that is huge. One of the things that I love to talk to parents about is saying, when you're having a conversation with your child, ask, do you want me here to listen? Or do you want me here to listen and respond? Because what you mentioned is so true. Like, a lot of parents are talking at the kids, not realizing they're doing that.
Yeah.
Because their perspective's different, right? Like, they've seen it. They've been through some of these things.
Yeah.
And we have to realize that the child is not seeing it through the same lens you are. So that's why we need to, like Stephen Covey, seek first to understand where your child is coming from, because it's totally different than when we were kids.
Oh, like, it is. I would not. I have no interest in being a parent, but between, excuse me, my water break.
Yeah.
Between my sister, my partner's sister, and my two best friends, I have 10 nieces and nephews. Mm-hmm. And I view my best friend's kids as family.
Yeah.
And so seeing what they go through and they struggle with, like, my partner's nephew is 16, and the struggles he deals with on a daily basis are vastly different than the struggles I dealt with, that my partner dealt with, that our parents dealt with. And, like, it is, I can't even fathom what kids 5, 6 right now are going to deal with in 10 years.
Yeah, it will be different.
Yeah.
It will be different. It's things that we never experienced.
Yeah.
And, my teens now are not going to, we may have experienced the same emotions, right?
Yeah.
Or some similar experiences, but the way we interpret it and the effect it had on us can be different from person to person.
Yes. And what triggered that emotion. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's so many different, like, dynamics, and this is why this is like a evolving thing. Like, what I've created, we have the system. Yep. We have the system, but some of the ways in which we do it, the research, the data, the needs in communities is going to shift based on what we're seeing. But we know there has been a huge increase in those kids struggling with anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, and attempts.
Yeah. I mean, it happens everywhere, both urban and rural environments. It happens everywhere across the globe. And whatever, again, everything is a shade of gray. So, like, what works in rural Idaho is not going to work in Salt Lake, is not going to work in New York City.
Yep.
They are very different places, and you have to approach them completely differently. Because, like, dealing with being on a farm is very different than dealing with like gangs in an inner city.
Yes.
And those are, again, similar emotions, but different approaches.
And different situations. And so it's like finding those who can mentor.
Yeah.
Those and have that connection, that relatability in that community. And that's why it's so important to build community.
Yes. 100%.
And to create that together.
In 10 years, ideal world, what would the community around you look like?
A lot of people believing that they can make a difference, that their voice matters, that they are empowered to step out of their comfort zone, to be able to make a change, even when other people oppose it. Right? Because those people who really are the disruptors and the change makers, they have a lot of resistance that comes up against them because they see the challenges before everybody else does. Right? And so a lot of times starting movements of stuff, it's against the grain. It's against the grain of doing something. And a lot of people, you know, with the work that I'm doing, we're in crisis mode. We're in, okay, where's the fire burning the most right now? And let's just go put that out. And
it's a lot of how do we put the fire out, not how do we prevent the next fire.
Yes. Yep. And so that's where we've got to go back and build, create some roots. Let's plant this. And let's build it. And we've got to start with raising these kids and giving them these tools, and the parents and the schools and the communities, right? Of a system of something that can empower them, right? Like this is not like all of my stuff. It's me looking at my research, looking at all of these people who have done studies for years and going, okay, what do all of these have in common? And best teaching practices, all of those things that I knew could impact the kids. So I really think in the next 10 years, kids are going to have more say in their education, which we're already seeing a slide with that. I know up in Davis School District, they've got Davis Catalyst, which is really cool. What's that? So Davis Catalyst, so at my gala, I had teens come and do the videography for my event. So they're actually getting kids high school kids, anywhere in Davis School District, where they can take classes at Davis Catalyst, whether it's in videography, whether it is in manufacturing. They have a culinary arts program, robotics, different things, where these kids can choose into doing that. And then they connect them to businesses, people in the community who are doing those. So they're learning the skill and then they apply it to someone's. Awesome. And I know colleges are doing this. There's tons of programs at UVU is incredible doing this. Utah State, like a lot of these college campuses are doing that, but adapting it a little bit earlier in high school is forward thinking.
I feel like that also helps kids weed out, do I actually like this or do I hate this before they get to college? Because again, having similar conversations a lot recently of you're 17, 18 and you're expected to go to college, which thankfully is starting to change a bit of college isn't as necessary, but especially when we were coming out of high school, you were expected to go to college in freshman year. You were supposed to know what you wanted to do for the next 50 years of your life. Which, when I was 18, I didn't know what I wanted for dinner the next day. So how am I supposed to know what I'm going to do? I didn't pick up a camera in any serious capacity until my senior year of college. And I have a general communications degree, but I never would have anticipated that I am where I am. And if you asked me in high school, I would have laughed at you that I'm where I am today.
I would agree with that. And most people end up changing their majors with stuff. And if we think back to just the science of things, your brain's not fully developed till you're 25, 26 now. So, and the way in which the world has shifted,
Yeah.
You know, because my uncle, he actually just passed away this last week.
I'm sorry.
And thank you for that. But he battled Parkinson's for lots of years. It was a huge blessing, you know, for him to pass. But his role, and we need to talk about the Egyptian theater, because I don't know if you know, like, I'm like, anyway, so he's the reason that the Egyptian theater exists now.
Okay.
So like in the 80s, he worked for 12 years to save that theater.
Fascinating.
Right? And to see his life work. But he only had 2 jobs his whole life, 2 full-time jobs. One was for 8 months and one was for 40 years up at Weber State.
Okay.
So it's like,
most people move jobs like every 3 years now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is the norm. Like, so to pick a career, you know, or to pick a degree, to pick a career and stay there is not realistic.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's totally shifted with everything.
And it's only going to change more. Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share?
Well, I said the 3 catalysts.
Oh, yes.
So let's jump back to that.
Yeah,
like
sorry.
I did. No, you're good, because we got like into.
We got into some really good conversation.
Yes, we did. So the catalyst where I stepped out of the classroom, because I would have stayed for these kids.
Yeah.
Like I would have. I know I was making a difference in their lives, but was to step out, to be able to have my classroom, not just those kids who come into it, but my classroom everywhere. But the catalyst that launched that was November 11th, 2021.
Okay.
And so Veterans Day, right?
Yep.
It's Veterans Day. And so the school had vets come in the morning. So my dad was a Vietnam vet.
Okay.
And so I asked him to come. The school had flags lined up, and other veterans were there. And at the school I was at, so I was teaching I had my 9th grader with me. My 9th grade niece was there, 7th grade niece, and then my sister-in-law worked at the school too. Okay. And then I was there. So there were 5 family members there. And I was like, Dad, it would be so cool. Yeah. Like, this will not happen again for all of us to be here. Yeah. And so he came in the morning, welcomed kids in, had his Vietnam, painting there, and just all these kids saying thank you for your service. Yeah. And those Vietnam vets, like, they did not get thanked, but what kids don't know the history of all of that. They're just like, you're a hero for what we do. Like, thank you. Yeah. And so my dad welcomed kids in. We gave the pledge and a couple different classes, and just super cool with that. And then he and my mom came back later that day for my advisory class, and I had my sister-in-law bring, her class in as well. It talked about, different stories, asking, these kids, like, who their heroes are, telling, funny things about Vietnam, telling stories about how he and my mom met. And I love sharing this one because, like, it shows who my dad and my parents and their relationship, and kind of more background, about my character too, with my amazing parents. We are
a product of our parents.
Yeah.
Whether we like it or not.
Yes, like the good and the bad.
Yes, 100%.
And I'm grateful I have a lot, they did a lot of good. Yeah. But one of the stories he shared was about how he and my mom had met.
Oh, nice.
And like just their dating and different things, and she was there, and he goes, and there she is. That's the love of my life. Oh. And look, all the kids did that too. Oh, right? Yeah. And
how many years have they been married?
They had been married, so 52, it's going to be 53 years. Like, so we had done a family, 50-year celebration, which I'm so grateful that we did that. Yeah. Because while he was in the classroom, little did we know that he looked over at me and goes, "Leash, I'm feeling a little dizzy."
Oh boy.
And I said, "Dad, do you need to sit down in my chair?" And little did we know that my dad was actually going to take his last breaths in my classroom.
I am so sorry.
Yeah. Like, so this, I call it a beautifully tragic day, like the most beautifully tragic day of my life. Yeah. Because I got to have the best last day ever with my dad. Yeah. Doing something he loved. He was
very positive memory overall.
He was an English teacher, an administrator.
Oh, that's cool.
So he was in my classroom talking about his love of God, country, and family. Yep. And he got to tell my mom moments before he passed, how much he loved her.
That's awesome.
And one of the amazing things that goes with empowering kids, like, because all year I'd been, you know, teaching these kids and giving them all of these ways in which they can do the work, right? Yeah. I'm their coach.
Right.
You know, I'm their mentor with things. And when I was there holding my dad, I had 2 students step up and say, Miss Butler, I can do CPR. I can do the cadence.
Yeah.
And so I had teen heroes for me that awesome. Day, saving a hero. So when you ask about the Hope Hero and how that comes and how heroism, however you want to say that, plays a role, it's because my dad was my hero, an American hero, and he taught me to be my own.
That's huge.
And then what I am doing is now I am teaching others to be heroes of their own stories and have that hope with it, that they can, no matter what has happened. Because I've told you 3 pretty...
very different stories of very big moments of life.
That have impacted me in a way, like, honestly, a lot of people blame situations or their past or things that happen of reasons why they can't do something because of this trauma and this. And what I've done is turned that pain into purpose. That, you know, those moments into passion that fuels to go, no, I'm not going to stay in that cave, right? Because people can justify it all day.
Totally.
Right? I mean, I could be an alcoholic right now and people would be like, yeah, she's been through some crap. That most people are not going to get up off of the couch from, right? And it's justified. But what I am trying to do is real life resilience. Like, I went back to the classroom. I went part-time. And because I had my son and my 2 nieces there who had to walk through those doors every day knowing that grandpa never walked back out. And those kids who were impacted by events that they didn't have control over. Right?
Totally.
But they were there. And so, you know, those kids, and there were many who struggled with it.
I'm sure.
And because
it's
traumatic.
Also probably the first time a lot of them experienced death firsthand.
Yes.
And that drastically changes you.
It does. It does. It creates that. And so I knew I needed to go back, not only for me to know, okay, can you do this? Can you get through this? Can you pick yourself back up? And the answer is yes. Am I the same?
Awesome.
No, I am different. And I am different because of that. And the work that I'm doing would not be the same work or would not have come about in the same way if I had not had those lived experiences.
That's
right?
Very fair.
And so I went part-time, finished out the school year, and then it was, you know, I would have stayed. I was going to stay 1 more year, but it just ended up being that, you know, it's time. It's time to spread.
Time to do it.
It's time to
go deep.
It was. And so the magic and everything that has happened since then, like, even though this has been, I mean, if you go back to 2000, when my boy was, 7, I've been doing and prepping for this that has happened, and even where my degree's in psychology, right? Like, so I, since I was 18, I have been preparing to do this work, and you just don't know when. Did that just click off?
No, we're good. We're good. That was the thermostat, I think.
Oh, okay.
But it was a worry of, like, what was that noise?
Yeah.
I mean, that's, you hit the nail on the head with a lot of it. And I think that what you're doing is going to have an impact that I don't even think is yet realized, because every person that you help has the potential to help 5 or 10 more. And so it can spread like wildfire, and it's literally just like planting seeds here and there.
And that's what I'm doing. I'm planting the seeds. I'm sharing the message of it. And then if it resonates, great, people can jump on board and join us in this movement of hope, right? And if not, it's okay, because there's, like, lots of times it's, until you're ready. The teacher appears when you're ready.
100%.
Right? And so it just might not be time for you to hear some of this, and that's okay.
Yes.
Like, I'm not pushing this, forcing this on anyone. It's like, here's what I'm doing. You're welcome to come on board, because I'm doing it for these kids and these families, because they're our future.
And everyone knows when they need it, but they don't know when, like, they don't know they need it until they know they need it.
And that's what I'm trying to shift.
Yeah.
I don't want you in the club I'm in.
I
don't want you to have to go through all of these
things.
And
that's part of the education aspect of it. And
it is.
Like you dealt with a 7-year-old that most people think, oh, that doesn't happen when you're 7. No, it does. How do we teach kids from a young age to truly be their best self?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a process. It's like what you're talking about. And
life
this podcast,
life is a process, and you're always going to be learning.
Yeah. Yeah. And you figure out and you pivot, and sometimes it may work, and sometimes, you're going to have to shift with things. So, yes.
Awesome. All right. Where can people find you?
People can find me. I'm on Instagram at The Hope Hero, Rise with Elysia. Our website is thehopehero.com or thehopeherofoundation.org.
Awesome.
And they can find me there, Facebook, LinkedIn, everywhere, you can connect on social.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I once again want to thank Elysia for coming on the podcast. I learned so much about mental health and everything that's going on with kids these days that doesn't really get discussed in adult-only circles, especially adult circles that do not have children above the age of 5. And I really appreciate her openness and honesty and willingness to talk about some really tough things, and also just her heart for helping the next generation have better opportunities at a successful and fulfilling life. That, not saying that my generation doesn't have it, but if we can make it easier for the next generation, why wouldn't we do so? Next week, we have an awesome guest. His name is Madison Perkins, and he is the owner of Ute CrossFit here in Salt Lake City. We are going to have an awesome conversation about fitness, life in Oklahoma, amongst other things. I hope you guys have a great week. See you on the next one.